Hey, what's up guys? I'm working on a 2014 Ford F-150 with the 5.0 Coyote engine. Going to show you how to drain the cooling system, replace your thermostat, and then of course refill the cooling system. So let's get started. First you'll start out by popping your hood. Once you get your hood open, go ahead and locate your coolant reservoir here. We'll go ahead and pull that cap off really quick. Now you want to make sure that the engine is cool or it sat overnight or something like that, because you don't want to open this when the engine is hot. So just go ahead and untwist this. There may be a little pressure. Just pull that off. I'll set that up there. So now we can go ahead and drain the radiator. So your drain plug is going to be on the very bottom on the passenger side here. I'll go ahead and crawl under there in a second. Now I went to do this the other day and I noticed that the radiator drain plug was actually broken off in there. So whoever did this last broke that without saying anything. So I wanted to make sure I got a replacement drain plug before I started draining it. So I picked this up off Amazon. This is the Dorman 61145. It was only about $8. I'll put a link in the description for it. But you may want to just pick one of these up anyways, because I think these have a tendency to break pretty easy just because they're made out of plastic, and over time the heat just makes them kind of brittle. So you may want to pick one of these up. But if you notice in here, you can see you can stick a flathead screwdriver in there to loosen it up and to start draining it. So let's crawl underneath there and see if I can get this old one off. So get yourself a nice drain pan like this. You can get this off Amazon as well. They're pretty cheap. I'll put a link in the description for one. But what I like about this is it tells you about how much you're draining out as well. So you can use that as a reference when you go to start filling. And then I like to just use a piece of cardboard here because antifreeze seems to splatter all over the place. But also get yourself a hose. I believe this is a 3/8 hose, and then we can put it on the bottom of the drain there. That way hopefully it'll drain down into the pan here. So probably the best way of getting in here is through the wheel well here, the passenger side. Let me get my camera in here. And then you got the splash shield. You can just pull back a little bit here just to gain access to the drain plug right there. As you can see, that one is broken, so I'm hoping that I can just stick a small screwdriver in there, hopefully to untwist that. But normally you just take a flathead, start draining it, and you can see that little nipple below the drain plug. You can stick that hose on there and that'll go into your drain pan. So let me go ahead and do that next. Okay, so I'll grab my hose here. We'll get this up onto that little nipple there. Just get that pushed on, and then I'll stick this in my drain pan. So hopefully it doesn't make a huge mess. Take this small flathead. Like I said, I'm not sure if this is gonna work or not. I'm hoping there's enough in there to catch. You can see it just wants to break some more. So it looks like another piece broke off there. There we go. So you can see it starting to come out there. So it looks like that's gonna work. And I wanna pull this out completely. You guys won't need to pull this out completely if it's not broke. But for right now, I'm just gonna let this drain, because if I pull that out completely, it's gonna make a huge mess. So let's go ahead and just let that drain for now. So while we let that drain down there, let's go ahead and remove the air intake pipe here off the throttle body, and then from the air filter. That gives us more room because the thermostat's located right under here. So to get this off the throttle body, you got an 8mm hose clamp here. And then you got another one up here at your air filter housing. So just loosen those up enough to slide off. And then you're gonna have a hose right here. This one you can just pull straight off like that. We got another one down here. Let me move my camera. So for this hose by the throttle body here, you got one of these quick disconnects. So what you're gonna do is kind of push in on the hose. And as you're doing that, you're gonna press in on that gray tab and you're gonna kind of bring it up towards the top and then back. So kind of press in and then see, you can rotate that and then you should be able to pull that off of there. So you can see how that kind of works. So just kind of press in and then lift up and then go out with it. So now you should be able to pull this off so you can get it off the air filter housing here. So just kind of slide it back and forth, break that free. And then you should be able to just kind of pop this off the throttle body. Pop that off and remove it. So now with that out of the way, that gives us access to our thermostat housing, which is going to be right here. But what I like to do is I like to stick a rag in the throttle body there just to make sure I don't drop any nuts or a little tiny screw or something and not see it. You can see this throttle body is kind of dirty, so I'll probably clean this while I have it off. But for right now, I'll just stick a rag in there so you don't drop anything down in there. Now, another common thing on these 5.0s is this coolant line right here. It goes back to your heater core there. This will start to leak on you. I did a video on a separate truck, so if you guys are interested in that, check out that video. I'll link it in the top of the screen there. But this is another common failure point on these 5.0s. This will start to leak right here and start to build up coolant there. So you can see that's pretty much done draining for right now. So let's see if I can get this plug out the rest of the way here. Now that I know it's not going to make a huge mess. Oh, and I just pushed it in a little bit here, so hopefully I can turn it back out. So if I can get it about right there, I'm going to grab a pair of pliers and see if I can just pull that out now. Because that should be able to just pull out. It's got a couple O-rings that kind of hold it in there. Oh, and it's just breaking up. You can see it just wants to break on me. It's so brittle. There we go. All right, good. At least that's out. So you can see that there's those two O-rings that kind of hold it in there. So taking a look at the new plug here, you can see that's pretty much the same thing. You can see it looks like this one's been broken for a while. It's all oxidized and everything. Now they do include this little washer here. I'm not exactly sure if that is supposed to go right there. I'm assuming, because the old one didn't have anything like that. So I'm assuming that's probably what that's for, hopefully. So next we'll go ahead and remove the thermostat housing. Now I'm gonna leave that drain open because it's still coming out there a little bit. Plus once we pull that thermostat housing, it might actually flow a little more coolant in there. So I'm gonna leave that one open. I got a second pan underneath here to collect some of the coolant that spills from the thermostat. And if you guys don't have a second pan, you can always just put your, or close up your drain plug or put your new one in there. So I don't like to make a huge mess, so I also got this little Tupperware bin here. I'm gonna see if I can stick this down underneath the thermostat housing there, so we don't make a huge mess either. So maybe something like that. If I can get it to stay here or not. We'll see if that kind of collects some of the coolant that drops down when we pull this hose and the thermostat here. So grab yourself a pair of vice grips, pair of pliers, whatever you want to use. We'll get on the spring clamp here for the hose. We'll squeeze on that. And then you can just kind of wiggle that downward a little bit. If you squeeze these enough, it will lock on there. That's not always the case. Because it kind of gets stuck in the grooves of the hose there. So I just like to slide it down a little bit, just enough past the thermostat housing there. And then you can take like a large flathead screwdriver here. Let's see if we can just kind of press down on this hose here. And you can see my pan already fell. Let's see if I can hold this while pulling that off. Like I said, I just don't like to make a huge mess if I don't have to. So we'll pull this off. There we go. So you can see it kind of going into that pan there, and actually didn't make too big of a mess here. Just try to get all that coolant out of there. Just set that there for now. So then you go ahead and rotate this hose back behind here. So now we'll go ahead and take off the 2 bolts holding the thermostat housing on. So those are going to be 8mm. So you got one on top here, and then directly opposite of that is going to be the one on the bottom. So go ahead and undo those bolts. See if I can reach this bottom one here. So undo those. And there may be more coolant that will leak out of this as well once we pull these off. So I'll get my pan back underneath here just to collect some of that. So there's the bottom bolt. That's what that looks like. I'll do this top one here. I'll break it free. And then I'll get my pan ready. Bring us back over here. Now that that hose is out of the way, gives us a little more room as well. And looks like I need to loosen that a little more. Okay, so with that bolt out, let's see if we can pull this thermostat housing off. There we go. Once we pull the thermostat, there may be some coolant coming out of there. So let me grab a pair of pliers. Set this aside for right now. So one thing you want to do before you go ahead and pull the thermostat out of there, let me see if I can zoom in, is you want to pay attention to where the bleeder, the air bleeder valve is. So you can see it right there. So it looks like it's facing the front of the truck. And if you notice, the thermostat is kind of lined up and down, and then the bleeder valve is going to be towards the front of the truck there. We just want to make sure that we install the new thermostat the same way. So grab yourself a pair of pliers and get this tray back under here. And let's go ahead and grab onto the thermostat there. And we'll go ahead and pull that out. Because it may be pretty stuck in there. You can see that just doesn't want to come out of there. There we go. Let's pop that off of there. And you've noticed there is an O-ring that sits on top there. And looks like we're good, so not much coolant came out of there. Okay, so before I go ahead and put the new thermostat in, I'm gonna actually put the housing back on without a thermostat in there. And I'll put the hose back on, because what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna fill this cooling system back up with some distilled water, and then I'll go ahead and drain it again, because I wanna make sure I get most of this orange coolant out of here, because Ford doesn't recommend using this orange coolant anymore. They actually don't even make it anymore. You can get it in other brands, and it's totally fine, but Ford has now switched over to this yellow coolant, and this is what they recommend using in these trucks here. Now this stuff is compatible with the orange, so if you decide not to do a flush, you can totally mix the orange with the yellow with no issues. I did that on a 2015 6.7 liter Power Stroke. It's still running strong today, no issues at all. So I just like to get as much of it out as I can, just because it kind of discolors the coolant to where it's an orange yellowish mix. I prefer hopefully just an all yellow. But let's go ahead and throw the thermostat housing back on there, and then we'll get our hose on there too. So now we'll get the thermostat housing back on here. Now I'm not going to use the O-ring that was on there for the thermostat, so this will probably drip a little bit. That's totally fine. I just don't want that gasket getting lost in there. So let me get this started on here, and we'll just get it snug, and then we'll get our hose on here as well. So now I'll go ahead and get the thermostat housing back on here. I'm not going to use the O-ring because that doesn't really fit on here too well, and I don't want that getting lost in here. So this will most likely probably drip on you, but that's totally fine since we're going to be draining it again and sticking a new O-ring on there. So I'll just get these screws started in here. We'll get these snug, and then we'll get our hose on here. And I'll actually just get these tight with the nut driver. And then I'll go ahead and get my hose back on here. And then you can get your hose clamp put back on there. So now we'll go ahead and close up your drain valve for your radiator, or in my case, replace it with the new one. I did lube up these O-rings with some coolant on there. And I'm not going to use that washer because on the package there, it does say this is for like Mercedes and a couple other manufacturers. So I wonder if they use the washer, but I'm going to try it without it. We'll go ahead and stick this back in here. Just push in. And now we should be able to just kind of screw this in. So that screws in nice and easy. And I'll just get this finger tight because we're going to drain it again. Or in your case, if you want to use your flathead, go ahead. So I got that tight. So like I said, I'm just going to fill this with a bunch of distilled water. You can get this from Walmart, or check out the description there. I'll have a link in there for this. If you have the Walmart Plus, you can get this delivered for free. But I got a whole bunch of this. So let's just go ahead and fill up the reservoir here until it gets to the full mark, and then we'll go ahead and just kind of drain it. Like I said, just want to get all this old orange coolant out of there. And then just make sure you got your pan under there. You can see it is leaking from the thermostat housing just because we don't have that O-ring in. So it's just a drip down there. So I put in about 1.5 gallons, almost 2 gallons maybe. You can see that we're in between the cold max and minimum range there. And if you take a look down here at the pan that I drained most of it out of, let's see if I can zoom in here for you guys. You can see that measures in quarts. And so this line here is 10 quarts. If I tilt this just a little bit, you can see that brings it down to 5 quarts. So I'd say that's probably about 6 quarts that we drained out, 6 to 7 quarts. So I'm gonna call that good on the distilled water. About 1.5 gallons, almost 2 gallons that we added. So now we can go ahead and open this drain valve back up. Let's go ahead and drain out that water we just added. And hopefully that flushes most of the orange coolant, or what was left of it, out of the system here. So I'll loosen that back up. We'll go ahead and let this drain again. So as you can see with that draining, it's pretty much running clear, so that's a good thing. We got most of the orange coolant out of there. There's probably going to be some left in the heater core, but that's totally fine. The new yellow stuff can mix with that. So I'll continue to let this drain, and then we'll pull that thermostat housing back off and get our new thermostat in there. So I'll get this hose clamp pulled back off here. Drop that down enough. Pull this hose back off. I'm not too worried about it making a mess because it's mostly water now. You can see there's still some orange coming out of there, but at least that's going into the pan there. So again, go ahead and pull off your thermostat housing. Get this hose out of the way. So now let's take a look at the old thermostat and O-ring along with the new one. So the old one is the original Motorcraft. You can see 190 degrees Fahrenheit. That's what that looks like. And you got your O-ring here. So the new one, I went with just the genuine Motorcraft again. I got this and the O-ring off of Amazon. I'll put a link in the description for it. But you can see here's the new thermostat, and it doesn't say 190 degrees on it, but it did say on Amazon's website that it was. and that's 87.5 degrees Celsius, so about 190 degrees Fahrenheit. And then the new O-ring here. So the O-ring is from Felpro. Same thing off of Amazon, 35991. And you can see it's the same size as that one. And if you notice, they did update the thermostat a little bit from the old style. So now this new one has a plastic, which I don't know if I really like that, but it is genuine Motorcraft, so we should be all right. And then it looks like they got rid of this rubber here on top, whereas the new one does not have that. So let's go ahead and get this new one in. So grab your new thermostat along with your O-ring here. And if you remember, the air valve was about, I'd say 10 o'clock position or so. I'm gonna try and put that at the 11, 12 o'clock position, because that should be right around the top of the housing. So you wanna make sure that's lined up correctly, and it's kind of harder to see, but I'm thinking about right there. Take your O-ring, and you gotta kind of just set this on top of your thermostat, and hopefully that holds it. If this doesn't hold it, then we're gonna have to get our housing on here along with it. So you can see that just doesn't want to hold it. So let me grab the housing here. Let's get this housing into place. Just make sure you don't pinch that O-ring. It's kind of a dumb design. So get your housing into place. Just want to make sure you don't pinch that O-ring as well. So I think we're good right there. Let me just double check. So you don't want to pinch that O-ring and then it starts to leak on you. Because you can see it sits kind of right on top here. So if you get it centered there, and you know this is going to be the top. So if you get your thermostat in there about there like that, make sure this is on there even. And then you can take your bolts. Let's get this kind of set in here. So if you do something like that, grab your bolt. Let's get one of these bolts started here just to hold that. I'm just kind of holding pressure on it just because I don't want that to pop out. Grab your other bolt here. Get that one started on the bottom. And of course that one's having a harder time getting started here. There we go. So get that bottom one started as well. Grab your 8mm. Let's go ahead and get these snug. So get those snug, and if you want to, you can torque these. It's going to be pretty hard to get a torque wrench in here, but I'll try really quick. But the torque's going to be 7 foot-pounds. So let's just see if I can get my torque wrench in here or not. Looks like I can get on the top one at least. Maybe. Yeah, I just don't have enough room to get that torque down. So just get them nice and snug, about what you would think 7 foot-pounds is, which really isn't much at all. And it was super easy pulling these off when I did loosen them. So just keep that in mind. You don't want to over tighten them either. So I'm gonna say about right there. So now we can go ahead and get our hose back on here. So get that lined up, get that slid on. Grab your vice grips or whatever you're using to get your hose clamp moved up here. Squeeze on that, and I may have to go a little tighter. go. Let's get that slid. So then come back down below here. Let's go ahead and tighten up our drain valve on the radiator. So get that screwed in. You can get your hose out of here. So get that set in there. And just kind of make sure that's all the way tight, so we should be good there. Now we can go ahead and get our air intake in. Now I did go ahead and clean that throttle body. You can see how clean that is, a little bit better. I was just using some of this throttle body cleaner and then a rag. Sprayed a little bit on there, wiped it off. So you can get this off Amazon as well. I'll put a link in the description for it. So then go ahead and grab your intake tube here. We'll go ahead and get that back on here. We'll go on the throttle body first. And then I'll rotate it down to the air filter housing. Get that slid on. Go ahead and tighten up your hose clamps. Get your hoses back on. And this one will just snap on. All you gotta do is push it on and it should just snap into place. So now let's take a look at the coolant I'll be using. So like I said earlier in the video, Ford has discontinued the orange coolant that originally came in this vehicle. They now want you to swap over to this yellow coolant. And they say that this can mix with the orange coolant, no problems at all. You'll have no issues if you mix it, so keep that in mind. Like I said earlier too, I did a 2015 6.7 liter Power Stroke. I mixed the yellow with the orange and I haven't had any issues with that truck at all. So I did get the concentrate, so 2 gallons of the concentrate. I got this off Amazon. I'll put a link in the description for it. And then I got 2 gallons of distilled water, so I'm gonna mix this 50-50. Now to fill it, I am going to use this OEM Tools part number 2444. You can get this off Amazon as well. And this is a vacuum filler for the cooling system. Ford does recommend using this just because it gets all the air out, so you have no cavitation or anything that'll tear up your water pump. So I do recommend using one of these. You don't have to. You can always do it the old-fashioned way just by squeezing the upper radiator hose to get all the air out. But this thing comes in so handy. I've used it so many times and it just works awesome. So what it is, like I said, it just hooks up to your air compressor. It's got a Venturi valve and it pretty much pulls a vacuum on the cooling system. You can even see your radiator hoses squeeze together. And then it also checks for leaks. So you let it sit for a little bit and that'll check for any leaks in the cooling system. If the gauge doesn't move, then you're good to go. And then it just pulls the coolant from a bucket or whatever you want to use, and it fills it all the way up, and you shouldn't have to top it off either. It puts the correct amount and everything into the cooling system. So let's go ahead and get this hooked up now. So inside this kit, you're gonna have a bunch of adapters. You want to find the one that fits inside of this with the tightest seal. So it looks like maybe that one or possibly this cone, but we'll go ahead and try this 40 millimeter. So what you do is you just put that in there. Go ahead and grab this, and then you're going to set this down in there. So you want to push that down in there, make sure it's got a good seal, and then you're just going to twist this, and eventually it's going to get tighter. So twist this until you have a good tight seal, because what that's doing is it's expanding this plug here, so that way you have a nice seal. So I'm going to say about right there like that. So then you just grab your air compressor connector here. You're going to push that on. So get that on there. And then you want to make sure all these valves are closed. So you want none of these valves open. Grab our air compressor hose. You're going to hook up your air. Now what we're going to do is we're going to open up this valve, and then we'll open this one. You want to keep this one closed because this is the one for your coolant. But if you look here, so on your gauge here, you can see this is going to start to climb as we turn on the air here. And you'll notice, like I said, your radiator hoses will start to kind of collapse because it's pulling that vacuum on the system. So let me go ahead and open this valve up here. It might get a little loud. We'll open up this one. And you should see this gauge start to climb there. So we'll go ahead and let that climb. It should get to about -18 or so. And then as you can see our radiator hose is collapsed. And you can see we're at about -18 or so. Just give this a couple minutes just to make sure that it doesn't pull any more vacuum. So you can see I gave that about another minute and the needle hasn't moved at all. So it's staying about right there. So I think we're good. So what you want to do, go ahead and shut off this valve. We'll shut off our air compressor valve. And then what I'm going to do is give this a few minutes. We want to make sure that that doesn't start going down. Because if that starts going down, then you know you have a leak somewhere in the cooling system here. So while we wait for that to sit there for a little bit and make sure there's no leaks in the cooling system, I like to grab a 5-gallon bucket here, set it on a little bit of a ladder, and then this is what's going to draw the coolant. So you got that little filter on there. So I like to set this in the bucket with all the coolant. So what I'm going to do is take both gallons of the concentrate. I'm going to dump that in here along with both gallons of the distilled water. That way we got a good mix here, and then we'll start drawing coolant from this bucket, and then whatever we have left over we can dump back into the original coolant jugs there and mark that they have been pre-mixed already. So then you want to just take this with your little filter, just make sure that's clean, there's nothing in there on that. You're going to drop this down in here. Now a lot of times this likes to float to the top. So I like to take a pair of vice grips here, I'll show you. Because I like to keep this sunken at the bottom because you don't want to suck in any air when you're doing this. What I like to do is just take a pair of vice grips here, just lightly squeeze on that when that's all the way at the bottom there. So we're probably going to have a lot left over, but that's okay. Like I said, this will be already pre-mixed, and then we can just dump it back into one of the bottles there and save for later. So as you can see, that needle still hasn't moved, so that means we're leak free in the cooling system, so we're good to go ahead and fill. So what you want to do is we still want to pull a little bit of a vacuum because we still got a bunch of air in this tube here going down to the antifreeze. So what you want to do is we'll open this back up along with this one here, and that's pulling a vacuum still, and then we'll open this up really slowly until the coolant reaches this point right here, and then I'll shut this back off, and then we'll turn off the air compressor, we'll unhook this, and then we'll start filling it. So I'll go ahead and open this. And I'll lightly open this one until the coolant reaches there, and then I'll shut it off quickly. Okay, so right there like that. You can turn off your air compressor one. Just unhook this, get that out of the way. And now we can go ahead and open this valve, and it'll start feeding the cooling system here. So let's go ahead and open this up. So that'll start filling the cooling system. You can see your gauge will start to go down. Once you hit 0, then you know it's all the way filled. Just keep an eye on this. We should have plenty, but if it gets low, you want to shut this off, and then you want to add some more, but I think we'll be okay. You also want to make sure that you don't suck any air. So like I said, you want to make sure that's all the way at the bottom. You can kind of see it down there. And as you're doing this, your hoses may start to expand a little bit as well. You can see we're starting to climb down on the gauge there. And then our coolant level is still going down. Like I said, I'm hoping we have enough. This should be enough, because we're about to hit 0. Yeah, we'll have plenty. So as you can see, now we're hitting the 0 there. So we should be good. You can see our hose is now not collapsed anymore, so that's full of coolant. So then you can go ahead and shut this valve off here. We'll go ahead and loosen this back up. Go ahead and pull that out of there. So like I said, we do have all this leftover coolant here, so I'm just going to fill that back into the original jug here, and then I'll just write on here 50-50 mixed already. So as you can see, we are a little overfilled here. Normally when you're using that tool, it doesn't overfill it. It brings it up just a little bit, but for some reason I brought it up more than we should. So if we need to siphon out any, we will. But let's go ahead and just get our cap on here. That way we can start it and make sure there's no leaks, because the cold fill range is right at the top of that line there. And as you can see, we're quite a bit above that. So okay, so now we'll go ahead and start this. And then if you notice our temperature, so we are cold right now. Let's go ahead and turn this all the way to hot. So we can get the heater going and get the coolant flowing through the heater core here. And then you just want to check. You check your thermostat there, housing. Make sure that's not leaking. As you can see, I don't see any drips. So we should be good right there. And then also go ahead and check your drain valve here on your radiator. You can see we're not leaking any there either. So we should be good. So as you can see, there's still some orange coolant that's mixing in with the green coolant, but that's totally fine. I'm gonna go ahead and let this idle. You can see our level is still pretty high. All right guys, so I went ahead and let that warmed up, and I actually took it on a little bit of a drive there. You can see now we're at normal operating temperature, and then do have hot air coming out of the vents here. So it means the coolant is running through the heater core. So we can go ahead and shut it off here. So taking a look underneath the hood here, you can see the orange did definitely mix with the yellow now. So that thermostat did definitely open up. And you can see our level is still high, but the engine is warm now, so coolant does expand with heat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and let this sit overnight. We'll let it cool off all the way, and hopefully this level will drop down to about the full cold max line right there, that top line. If it doesn't, I'll go ahead and open up that drain valve for the radiator with my tube on there. Just drain out enough to bring that down to the cold full line there. And if you guys overfill the cooling system, no big deal. It's not going to hurt anything or anything like that. And if you guys did it the traditional way with the funnel and then squeezing the upper radiator hose to get all the air out, and your level's pretty high, you just want to double check that in the morning as well, because that will probably drop down below the full cold line, and then you'll just top that off with your coolant. Okay guys, so it's the next morning, everything's cool, and you can see the level didn't really drop too much. So I'm just going to go down below. I'll go ahead and start draining it from the drain on the radiator. I'll go to that top line there. That's the cold full line. So I got my hose hooked back up here. I'm just going to reach up here, open this drain valve slowly, just to let some of that fluid flow out. And then I'll just keep observing up top here. Okay, so as you can see, I'm getting close to the top there, so I'm going to go ahead and crawl back under there. I'll go ahead and close up that valve, and we should be good. And as you can see, it really wasn't that much overfilled, but that's about how much I pulled out of there. So go ahead and get your cap put back on here. And like I said earlier, normally when I use that vacuum tool, it pulls only enough vacuum in the system to fill it up right to the top here. But for some reason, it just went a little over. So if you guys do use that vacuum tool, and right before it reaches 0, just check your level here to make sure it's not going to go over. If it is, just cut it off early and you should be good. Okay guys, so that's going to wrap up the video. Again, this was a 2014 Ford F-150 with the 5.0 Coyote engine. Went ahead and showed you how to drain the cooling system, replace the radiator drain, also replace the thermostat, and then of course refill the cooling system. And not too bad of a job to do on these trucks. At least you can still get in there and get it done. So hopefully this video helps you out. If it does, hit that subscribe button, give it a like, check out my other videos, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.